Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Tait, pastor of the Village Church. I want to thank you for joining me tonight for this our last Bible study for this spring. And I want to thank you all just for being so supportive. And good to see my two sisters on, Elder Jackie and Patience. And thank you all for being here, and I hope others will join us. And Deacon Charlie, there you are popping up. Good to see you as well. And so we know it's been a little challenging for some of you because we've been on YouTube and not Facebook, but hopefully in the next 10 or 15 days we'll be back on Facebook. But we also will stay on these platforms as well. So, because it gives us this gives a better chance of reaching other people, but also it doesn't get us in trouble when we say things that perhaps people don't particularly like for us to say. But I'm glad that you're here tonight, and I pray that you will enjoy what we're going to be dealing with tonight. It's challenging because there's so much left in Esther, but we do have to stop and take a little break here now. We've been going. This is our 13th lesson for the spring, and so summer is coming, and we may have a special session this summer. I'll let you know, but it will be brief, probably maybe 4 weeks somewhere along the line. But when we do that, if that happens, I'll let you know. So tonight, we're going to go to the book of Esther, and we're going to go to chapter 5 and look at chapter 5. And we probably will skip around to some of chapter 6 as well, and because it's a very intriguing story that's unfolding. So I want to pray for a minute, then we're going to get started. God, thank you for your blessings in our lives. I pray, God, that you will meet the needs of those who are watching tonight. I pray, God, that something that I share, something that we experience together will be helpful, it will be fruitful. And I pray tonight, God, that your blessings will be upon us. And I pray, God, that you would just use tonight as a way to speak. And because, God, there's so many things that are happening. And I pray that something we study tonight will be helpful in terms of our daily lives. And this is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. You know, it's so funny when you're trying to do things. There's always something disturbing. Some people coming by. Things are happening. Doorbells are ringing and all kinds of good stuff. But we're going on. You know how it is when you're fasting. Everybody wants to take you to lunch. I don't know if you've ever been to that, but everyone wants to take you to lunch. But let's go right to the word, okay? So we're reading from the Good News translation of the Bible, and it's chapter 5. I'm going to read some of it, and then we're just going to get right into it. It says, on the third day of her fast, remember Esther had been fasting along with many of the Jews because they were going to be exterminated because of Haman. And it says, on the third day of her fast, Esther put on her royal robes, and she went and she stood in the inner court of the palace. So she's in the inner court of the palace, and she's facing the throne. So she's not in the throne or the throne room, but she's facing it. And the king was inside. Or that's her husband, King Ahasuerus. And he's seated on the royal throne. So it kind of gives you this image. She's standing and he's sitting. And then it says, when the king saw Queen Esther standing, and then this tells us right there she's standing, she won his favor. We don't know how or why. Remember, there's a lot that has changed about who Esther is. She's no longer the person who first came to the palace, but she won his favor. And he held out to her the golden scepter, and then she came up and she touched the tip of it. What is it, Queen Esther? The king asked. Tell me what you want, and you shall have it, even if it's half of my empire. Esther replied, if it please your majesty, I would like you and Haman to be my guests tonight at a banquet I'm preparing for you. The king then ordered Haman to come quickly so that they could be Esther's guests. So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. That's important too, because now he's going to a location um, uh, away from where he normally is. He's going to where she is, and he's going to this banquet. So the king and Haman, they went to Esther's banquet. And then verse 6 says, over wine, the king asked her again, tell me what you want, and you shall have it. I will grant your request, even if you ask for half of my empire. Esther replied, if your majesty is kind enough to grant my request, I would like you and Haman to be my guests tomorrow at another banquet that I will prepare for you at that time, and I will tell you what I want. Now I'm going to stop there and then we'll continue the story. Tonight I want to talk about simply use your power. Use your power. I see the other Jackie saying she's very beautiful, but in this case, I don't know if her beauty was the same as she was when she was younger. Now, time has transpired. She probably was still a beautiful woman, but it seems that she was at a different place now. So it could be still her beauty. I'm not saying she's not beautiful, but maybe it's just something about her character. Because remember, the text says she put on her royal robes, and she's dressed not like he wanted Vashti to come with just her crown on and nothing on. She's not coming like this little naive girl who first came and was looking to be perhaps chosen as the queen. And at that time, the eunuch basically helped to get her dressed and suggested what she would wear. This time, she is she is more in control, because it says on the third day of her fast, she put on royal robes. She's made this decision to put on these garments, and it wasn't necessarily unnecessarily about fashion at the time. So when we look at this tonight, um, Esther seems to have a way of persuasion. Now, it's easy, I think, for particularly men to think that the way she's persuasive is because of her beauty, her sexuality, and those kind of things, her feminine wiles. But sometimes, to me, those suggestions can be, in a sense, pejorative and negative, because sometimes it's how we want to see women, that they're not intelligent, that they're not smart enough to make certain decisions or to be shrewd. We rather use the word conniving instead of shrewd. With men, we say they're shrewd, they're good businessmen, or they have, they use their minds. But with women, we use other negative terms, and we say they're conniving, when a lot of times they're not conniving, they're very intelligent, they're very smart. And so in this case, when we look at this text, it's very intriguing. And at first, I started thinking about this. It's easy to think and convince yourself that you don't have any power, based on your circumstances of life, the situation that you sometimes find yourself in. Like Queen Esther, she was close to power. By God, she was married to power. King Harassas, Harassas, um, um, I'm going too fast, but Xerxes, the same thing. She was married to power, her husband. But you can be in proximity to power, be close to power, and feel absolutely powerless. I don't know if you ever felt that way, or if you ever been in a situation where you've been around powerful people and you can be connected to powerful people. Matter of fact, you could know them. They could be on your favorite call list, but it doesn't mean that you really understand the power that you have. And sometimes we don't even recognize that we have power, that we have to find a way to use the power that we have. That's what I'm talking about tonight. Use your power. It may not be what you consider to be the same as somebody else's power, but you have to use the power that you have. And many of us, particularly those of us in communities and in groupings of people who have been sort of dominated, who have felt the sting of oppression and racism and sexism and classism, a lot of times we can fall into the trap to think that we really don't have power. And you've got to use the power that you have. And sometimes you have to tap into whatever it is that's at your disposal. Sometimes it's a way that you can be persuasive. It's a way that you may know people who you're connected with. It's a way in which you can sort of negotiate. And the thing is, sometimes people may see that as weakness, but it's not. It's using your power in order to get something done. And sometimes it may be just a way of connecting with the right person, or just standing up in the power that you have, even when it could be threatening to you. And we got to remember, Esther, she is really taking her life in her hands by what she's trying to do. But you can see by the way this is written, it's written from her perspective, how she is sort of measured in her approach. And she definitely has a plan in mind. All right. So we're going to go back to verses 9. It says, when Haman left the banquet, he was happy. This is in the same text, chapter 5. He was happy. He was in good mood. But then he saw Mordecai at the entrance of the palace. And when Mordecai did not rise or show any sign of respect as he passed, Haman was furious with him. Now, he was already furious. But here again, Mordecai still is not showing this man respect. And we don't know why. That could be a subject for another time. But he doesn't show him any respect. It has nothing to do with God. It has probably everything to do with Mordecai and his own sort of attitude and machismo in terms of just, and of course, we could go back and talk about enemies, but we don't know if Haman and Mordecai ever had any run-ins. So maybe they're going off history. And we know that happens even in neighborhoods where our church is. There young people who are fighting, some of them killing each other based off of stories of what happened in the past that has absolutely nothing to do with them in the present. So anyway, uh, Haman is furious again, but he controlled himself. Verse 10, and he went on home. Then he invited his friends to his house and asked his wife Zeresh to join them. And he boasted to them about how rich he was, how many sons he had, how the king had promoted him to a high office, and how much more important he was than any other of the king's other officials. So you can see that Haman sort of as a narcissist. He's all into himself. He's all about himself. He's very selfish. And so he's boasting about how rich he is, how many sons he has, and how the king has promoted him. Because when we talked about this a week ago, we don't know how he got, where his promotion came from. We know the king gave it to him, but we don't know what he did in order to earn his promotion. It's just kind of like he showed up in the story, and he has this high office, and he's more important in his mind, at least, than any of the king's other officials. Then in verse 12, what is more, Haman went on, King Esther gave a banquet for no one but the king and me, and we are invited back tomorrow. But none of this means a thing to me as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the entrance of the palace. So anyway, now he goes back to this because this is incensed him that Mordecai is sitting at the entrance of the palace, even though there's a decree out to exterminate all the Jews. See, sometimes the enemy is not just satisfied that they want that they want to do something to you, that they want to make life challenging. They absolutely sometimes want to destroy you, and that's demonic. And one thing you have to realize, and I don't use this language a lot, and I don't use it loosely, but when we're dealing with white supremacy, as the myth of white supremacy and racist oppression and systemic racism, it is absolutely evil, and it's a spiritual thing too. Because yes, it has practical ramifications, but when you think about how people can do things, it is at a deeper level, and it's demonic. That the things that people could do. We're coming up on a 100-year anniversary of Greenwood, which was a prominent neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Over 30 blocks. They African Americans had their own banks. They had businesses. They had a theater that They were about to put air conditioning in. They had doctors and lawyers and dentists, and they even had their own hospital. They had their own hotel. I mean, it was these people were doing extremely well. And of course, it was a little incident that happened, but it really was nothing. It was what was in the hearts of many of those whites at the time. They really were jealous and despised the way these black people were actually doing well in the country that says that, purports itself that everyone can do well if you just work hard enough. And an incident, a young man was a shoeshine boy who had to go to the bathroom downtown. The bathroom was on the ninth floor. He went into the elevator. The story goes that he sort of tripped in the elevator. The elevator operator was a white woman, and when he tripped, he tried to brace himself, and he inadvertently, I think, ripped her skirt, and of course he ran out. And you got to understand that the history, of this. If a white woman screams and you're a black man, you probably will be running too. And so he was accused of something that he didn't do anything to it. He wasn't raping her. That's always the case. You hear this, we want to rape folks, and when we the ones that have been raped, the stories they don't talk about in terms of how Christopher Columbus and these other first Europeans who raped our ancestors, but they said that we are rapists. So he ran out, and of course, then the town just did exploded. There was an excuse for whites to destroy this prominent area, and they even dropped bombs from the sky to just devastate the church, everything. So we're on the 100-year anniversary of that. So you understand full well what can happen to people when they get upset, when they really kind of operate on out of a place that's really demonic, that's spiritually full of decadence, and that's how Haman was. I mean, he wanted to destroy, exterminate all the Jews, and he says, in seeing Mordecai at the palace gate just incensed him. And so, verse 14, he says, so his wife and all of his friends suggested, you got to be careful with the friends you're around, suggested, why don't you have gallows built 75 feet tall? Tomorrow morning, you can ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it, and then you can go to the banquet happy. Haman thought this was a good idea, so he had the gallows built. He had the gallows built down by his house. He had it. He had the gallows built down by his house. So here is when we get into this text, we see that Queen Esther, of course, she puts on these royal robes. She is now no longer this little girl, just naive girl coming to the palace. She's a woman. She's close to power. She may not understand fully what her power is, but it's obvious that she recognizes that she does have some power. Now, as a matter of fact, in history of the world, and certainly in the history of the United States, um, dating back to 1619, women were often married to powerful men, but they themselves were often didn't have much power in and of themselves by themselves. And we're talking particularly here of white women. Black women who are African ancestors didn't have much power at all because they were enslaved. They didn't have power over their bodies because many times they were raped or they were made to be used to produce children against their will, like they were bred. There was breeding going on like animals. It's just horrific. But then, women in the society, they didn't have a lot of power. And so there was times in these yet to be United States, the banks could refuse women a credit card until the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 was signed into a law. Prior to that, a bank could refuse to issue a credit card to an unmarried woman, and if a woman was married, her husband was required to co-sign. Many banks required single, divorced, or widowed women to bring a man, listen to this, bring a man with them to co-sign for a credit card, according to CNN. And some discounted the wages of women as much as 50% when calculating their credit card limits, according to an article from the Smithsonian Magazine. So, and it is probably much, much more we're talking about in this context in America, but you think about in her time. So Esther in our text, she is no longer innocent. She is no longer this unassuming girl who doesn't know necessarily what's happening. Esther has matured into a woman who seems to know that she may not have the same power, but in some ways, the way this text is talking, it seems as if there's a move to a more sort of equal place, even if it's for momentary time, more momentarily. But she's realizing that she does have some kind of power, and that's what I want us to realize tonight. That sometimes we may think that we don't have much power in a society that has lorded over us and continues to do things like voter suppression laws and protest laws that are egregious against its own constitution. Still dealing with a country who says it's about democracy, but we still have the electoral college, and we're still doing gerrymandering to manufacture votes for a minority group of people in terms of whites standing power instead of really being a true democracy, one person, one vote. And also, when you have a place, let's say, for instance, um, I take PG County, for instance, which is predominantly African American county in Maryland. And the way gerrymandering would work is that you would find a small minority group in there. You would redraw the lines, and then that minority group, by redrawing the lines, would control the majority of the people in terms of how things are voted on. And so, when we think about this story and think about Esther and where she is, she had to learn to use her power. Now she put on this royal robes in verse 1. This was not about fashion. It wasn't just a mere comment about luxurious clothing. It literally means royalty, and that Esther is wearing. It means she is wearing, really sort of wearing her authority. She's wearing who she is. Um, in other words, she understands the power and the weight that she carries in the palace with the king, and that's how she comes. She comes wearing her royalty. She comes in a way in which he has to recognize that she's my queen, that she is the queen. She's not just a woman from the harem. She's not just one of his concubines. No, she's wearing royalty. She is the queen. Let me help you understand in case you haven't grabbed it. You know, if you ever looked at military movies, or if you've been in the military or know somebody in the military, when a person's out of uniform, sometimes you don't recognize necessarily who they are, even if you happen to be maybe in the same company of them or you're stationed in the same place, unless you really know who they are. But when they put that uniform on and you see those bars, and there's a certain authority that comes with that. There's a certain attention that brings, and I think that's exactly what Esther's doing. It's not about a fashion statement. It's about saying, I am the queen and I'm your king. And so she understands her power and she moves in her power. And it's important for us to understand that sometimes you don't think that you have a lot of power. You don't think that you can make anything happen. But sometimes you got to re-examine what you have. You got to re-examine, particularly how God has helped to shape you. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. You have grown. You have developed, hopefully, your mind. Hopefully, you've developed your spirit. And hopefully, you've seen, and even us in this situation, George Floyd, we all commemorated his murder on yesterday. It was a year. And of course, it's not a time of celebration, it's a time of mourning, it's a time of commemoration. Think about, here's a man, he didn't give his life. His life was taken. And so, but the thing is, he now becomes a symbol of what we don't want to see anymore. We don't want to see people's lives that are taken unfairly for no reason at all. And also, it's not just about the police. It's about a system that is sort of structured in a way that sees us, sees no real value in us. Well, the value that they see is not a value that's good for us. We're not criminals. We don't need to be filling up jails more than any other group. We don't have a criminal gene. We are God's children. We are human. As a matter of fact, every human on the planet has been made by God, and we have been made in the image and likeness of God. And creation, as we know it, all of it began in Africa. It doesn't make Africans better than other people. It's just a fact. And so, when you know that and you understand that, then you can stand up in your dignity and in the power that God has given you and understand, like Esther, she realized and she has grown. I'm the queen. I'm the queen. And so when King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes, looked at her husband, he said, "Wow, that's my queen." And then he kept repeating over and over again. And he said to her, "Tell me what you want. You shall have it, even if it's half of my empire, even if it's half." And look how she's strategic, because she gives a banquet first. She didn't even say anything about her people. She hasn't even come out yet. Remember, she still hasn't outed herself yet. He doesn't know that she is a Jew, and that will come in the preceding chapters. But I want you to understand tonight that use your power, the, the power that you have. Sometimes you have the power to influence. Sometimes you have the power to change. Sometimes you have the power to help other people to organize, like we are trying to do, the village is trying to do with WIN, Washington Interfaith Network. Sometimes you have the power to make a difference in someone's life. And you got to figure out you got to use your power. Sometimes we think that, we've got to do something grand, but sometimes it could be small. You think about what Esther was doing. I mean, she put on her royal robes. She stood up and who she was, and she simply said, "Look," she used what was at her disposal. She understood she was in a culture that liked to party, that liked to have a good time. She said, and she told her husband, "Look, I want to throw you a banquet, you and Haman." And that was strategic. She knew who to invite to the banquet, and so even in that, they would be drinking, they would be having a good time. And then also, I think in that instance, she was sort of working up her way in what she was going to say to the king, like how she was going to approach him. So let me come to a close tonight, as we have so far to go. So I'll share this with you, and we'll be done. But in chapter 6, it says that the king, he went to sleep that night, and so his official records were brought to him, and part of it included an account of how Mordecai had uncovered a plot to assassinate the king, a plot made by um, Bigthana and Teresh, the two palace eunuchs who had guarded the king's room. And the king asked, "How have we honored and rewarded Mordecai?" And his servants answered, "Nothing has been done for him." Now this is interesting, because he had this dream, and now he's thinking about Mordecai. Has been brought to his attention that, wow, this man helped to save my life, and I haven't done anything for him. So the plot thickens. But I want you to remember tonight. I want you to remember just this one thing: that you use the power, use your power, use your power. Now, As I close out tonight, listen, don't forget to subscribe, if you will, to the Village on our YouTube page so you can keep up with us. And I want to thank all of you again for supporting us. And whatever you have to give, you can share with our church. And you can do that through Givelify. You can do it through Cash App and help to support the ministry that we have at the Village. You can go to our website, which is thevillagepc.church, and help to support us. So I want to thank you in advance for all of your support. I want to thank you for your prayers. And so I want to close out tonight in prayer and pray that you will keep in touch. Don't forget to tune in on Sunday. So you'll see our broadcast at 9 a.m. every Sunday. And also pray for us and pray for the city and all over the country as people transition back into um, doing things as they were accustomed to doing before the pandemic. And remember, there's some things that will not go back, will not be the same. And hopefully we've learned some good lessons so we can go forward. So I want to pray, God, thank you for what we have learned tonight. I pray that we'll learn to use the power that we have. And I pray that someone on that was listening tonight will learn to use your power. You may not think that you have a lot of power. Whatever power you have to learn to use it. And this is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Look, have a good night and be safe. Safe travels, Peg. Love you.